Welcome to Canada's most irreverent talk show. This is the Andrew Lawton Show, brought to you by True North.
Hello and welcome to you all. It is Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022, just after 5 p.m. Eastern Time here on the Andrew Lawton Show if you are listening live. If you are listening to a pre-recorded edition of the program, it is whatever time it is for you, so you don't need me to tell you. But thanks very much for listening to Canada's most irreverent talk show here on True North. Back in the regular old studio, if you haven't noticed, I've been on the road for a little bit for work. So I was covering a bit of the travels as I was away, notably at the conference that never was in Albania about the Iranian resistance movement, which was a fascinating experience I'll have to talk more about in the future. I want to talk a little bit actually on this show about the travel process itself, because I experienced something which I didn't know about. I know you all think I know everything, but sometimes I learn new things, and not nearly enough as I should learn. But one thing that I came across that the government had done and did very quietly is change the mask mandate for airports. Now, they didn't change the mask mandate for airplanes. You still get thrown out of the plane over the prairies, and you plummet to your death if you take off your mask for more than 5 seconds at a time on domestic flights and whatnot. But you actually don't need to wear your mask in airports anymore unless you're going through what the government calls a regulatory process. So basically, if you're going through the customs screening or you're going through the security screening, or theoretically when you're boarding, but the boarding one is really fun because you also have to wear your mask, then take it off for them to verify your identity, then put it on, then walk on, and then sit down. And if you take a sip of water, you can take your mask off again. It's all because of the science. This is all science. And if you say no, you're a big Haiti knuckle-dragging troglodyte, but it's the science. Well, maybe not. We'll talk about that in a couple of moments with my friend and colleague, Rupa Subramanya. But the thing about the mask mandates, which I find fascinating, is that they have never really made sense. We all just sort of went along with them because we were told that it made sense. But I mean, the restaurant one, you have to wear it when you're standing up, and then when you're sitting, you can take it off because COVID has an altitude level, and the curfew because COVID only comes out at night. And the airport thing is great. If you're sitting in the restaurant, you can take it off. But if you're on the other side of the barrier sitting down, you have to keep it on. So what happened though, about a month ago, 3 weeks ago, the government very quietly eased the mask mandates for airports, as I just mentioned. So I didn't realize this until I got off my plane in Montreal. And I was walking around, looking around, and I wasn't wearing a mask because in my experience, no one at the airport was really enforcing the mask rule like they are in the planes. And I was looking around, I'm like, no one else was wearing a mask either. I'm like, oh, this is great. Okay, a little libertarian paradise, not normally what Quebec is. And then I saw staff were also not wearing their masks. Staff were not, like Air Canada staff, airline staff, even a couple of airport security people. And I'm like, has Quebec just had enough with this? And then I looked into it and realized that, actually in Quebec, people do not have to comply with the social mask requirement. And what they have done is gone along with what the government said. But then it struck me at Pearson Airport, very different story. Pearson Airport is still telling people wear their masks. Ottawa Airport, I'm told, is still telling people wear their masks. So the airports are going beyond the federal mandates now, which I don't think they should be allowed to do because, again, the airports are entities of government. They didn't have the latitude to say no to the mask mandates when the government was mandating them. So why do they get to unilaterally put their own on? So I never thought I'd say this, but good for Montreal Airport for actually not imposing this mask theater on people when the federal government is not making them. And when I say mask theater, it's not just the mask mandates. The vaccine mandates for air travel, very similar, no longer in effect, but we know it could come back at any moment, which is, I think, the critical problem here. These things are still hanging over us like the sword of Damocles. And I want to just remind you, if you haven't heard it a bajillion times right now, this is what Trudeau says he's doing throughout the entirety of his COVID response.
Mr. Speaker, from the beginning of this pandemic, we have followed science. We have had Canadians' backs. We've actually seen a less severe impact on lives, on livelihoods, and our economy than many other countries, including the ones that the Leader of the Opposition named. We will continue to follow the science. We will continue to lean on each other as Canadians as we make it through this pandemic. We know that it's tiring. We know it's exhausting, but we also know that having each other's backs is the way through this pandemic.
Having each other's backs, okay, you can take a drink for that one. Follow the science. You definitely got to take a drink for that one. I think you're in an alcohol-induced coma now if you take a shot anytime Justin Trudeau says follow the science. But that's been the message. Follow the science. Follow the science. Why are you mandating vaccination? Well, we're following the science. Why are you mandating masks? Well, we're following the science. Well, are they actually? There was a tremendous piece this morning in Common Sense. That is the Substack that Bari Weiss launched by my friend and colleague Rupa Subramanya, host of the Rupa Subramanya Show here on True North. And she says that Canada's travel ban did not have a scientific basis. Now, this isn't just Rupa's own opinion or conclusion here. This actually comes from court documents that the federal government has filed revealing their approach to these things. Rupa joins me now. Always good to talk to you, Rupa. Thanks for coming on. And what a tremendous piece. Congratulations. Oh, I'm having trouble hearing you, Rupa. I don't know if it's just on my end or if it's on yours. We will try to get that sorted out. But let me just say, first off, if you haven't caught this yet, head over to commonsense.news. Commonsense.news, and the story is called Court Documents Reveal Canada's Travel Ban Had No Scientific Basis. And you can see it there by Rupa Subramanya in Common Sense. Now, actually, just on the note, before we get into the meat of it and resolve the tech issues, Rupa wrote a fantastic piece during the Freedom Convoy that I cited in my book and have also talked about on the show a number of times, in which she talks to the people of the convoy. And this was, again, something that you couldn't get from the mainstream media in Canada. You couldn't get from CBC or CTV. You had to go to an American Substack at the time to really get that level of journalism that Rupa gave us. So my producer is going to tell me once we have Rupa back on. But the point that I have to make here, and that I think a lot of people need to realize, is that the point of these mandates was supposed to be about science. And when I say it's political and not scientific, this is not groundbreaking information to people that listen to this show. I think we've always known this is the case. We've always known it was political. I mean, the fact that this was announced during an election, the air travel mandates, it was a campaign plank on which Trudeau ran to get reelected, tells us exactly what he was trying to do here. He was trying to win votes off the back of the unvaccinated, off the backs of the unvaccinated. He was trying to win votes on this divisive policy that violates that sanctity of the individual, your ability, your right to make decisions about your own body. And I think a lot of people went along with this because they bought into the line that Theresa Tam was giving them at any point of the pandemic, whether it was that, oh, we need to close the border because it's what the science says, or earlier on it was we can't close the border because that's racist. But then when they got over that, they said we need to close the border. And then, okay, masks don't work. We said, okay, we won't take our mask. And then they say, okay, wear masks. And we say, okay, we have to do it. And a lot of people, I think, were willing to give and prepared to give the government the benefit of the doubt for far too long. And they did this because I think Canadians are generally speaking, or have historically been, generally speaking, more trusting of institutions, more trusting of government. Remember, I mean, the idea of a chief public health officer, a chief medical officer of health, this was not a job that most people in this country knew existed. I think we have like the Surgeon General warning on cigarettes that we see, but that is basically the extent of it. We have the American idea of what a head doctor is for a country, but it's not a job that's had any relevance in our lives before. I think we have Rupa back on the line now. Rupa, I'm not going to waste my opening with you and saying hello. I'm just going to say hello and then move on to why is it you wrote this piece in the first place?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, perfect. About that earlier. Sorry, question from me, please.
Basically, why did you write this piece? Why did you write this article?
Well, no, I mean, important pieces of work. And, it was a lot of work that it was important to bring them as concisely as possible. As soon as the court public, them, I spent my birth and so I spent a lot of it writing about it, and by the end of my reading, it just extremely.
Sorry, we're going to have to reconnect here, Rupa. Your audio is cutting in and out, so we are going to try to get you back on and hear that, because it's an important piece, and I know you did a lot of work on this. So we'll try to get you back on there, and I am sorry to the audience for the inconvenience here. What I am going to say, though, when I came in to Canada, and that experience I was describing earlier that very much ties in with this, at Montreal, where I actually tweeted about it. I don't think I have the tweet up, but I had tweeted about it and said, it was glorious to see people not complying. And at the time, I didn't mean complying in a legal sense. I meant complying with this social expectation that, travel requires a mask. Like, when you can get packed like sardines onto an airplane, I think it's safe to say that the mask is not going to be the determining factor in whether you get sick or not. But the point that I brought up with this is that when people are not complying, it's a sign that they are prepared to reclaim the 2019 normal. And parts of this are never coming back, and we know that. Parts of this are not ever going to come back. But we need to reclaim as much of it as we can. And the point that I was trying to bring up here when I said it was glorious was that it was great to see people not living in fear. And I think most people agreed with this. The thing got I don't know, however many hundreds or thousands of likes and retweets and all of that. And then at a certain point, the Twitter trolls started to respond and said, it's glorious to celebrate killing people. And it just became as unhinged as some of the just most insane rhetoric we hear about COVID. This idea that if you walk around an airport unmasked, you are not just killing grandma, but you're killing everyone in sight. You're actually just a serial killer. Every time you walk past a gate, you're just slaying 5 people just by breathing unmasked. And that's the sort of unhinged rhetoric we're hearing around COVID. And these are the people that are trying to keep us in a permanent state of fear and in a permanent state of panic. And some of these are very well-educated, and I might even say well-intentioned people. They have many letters after their names. They've got their MDs, their PhDs, their BSs, and I don't mean bachelors of sciences, by the way. And they've got all of this, and at the end of the day, they're the ones that have been in charge for much of the last 2.5 years. They're the ones that have been in control. They're the ones that have had the power. And I don't know if it's that they themselves are genuinely living in fear. I think a lot of them are. Or if they alternatively are just along for the ride and that they've enjoyed having this relevance and power and authority that they haven't really had ever before. And that's why they keep foisting this stuff upon us. But when Trudeau says follow the science, what he's saying is follow the scientists. He's saying 2 things. He's saying follow the scientists, and he's also saying follow his science. Because as we know, there is, I believe, a black and white, unvarnished truth out there. And science is science. Science is not subjective in theory. But in practice, different scientists are drawing different conclusions. So when Theresa Tam, who's a very well-educated doctor, says, we have to have mask mandates, and then another doctor says, well, actually, I've looked at the evidence and say we don't have mask mandates, what does following the science entail? And it's people treating these things as black and white that I think has been the source of such problems. So I believe we have Rupa Subramanya on the line now. I certainly hope, I'm crossing the fingers, I'm crossing my legs. I don't know if I can cross my toes, but if I could, I would do it. And we'll try this again. Rupa, thank you for your persistence here. Let me try a different tack here in asking you about this. And I wonder what it is that you really got out, or how did you get this out of the court documents, by the way? Because I think for a long time, people have been trying to get information from government with access to information requests. The Health Canada has been saying, yeah, it's going to take us, 72 years to get through this. We're very busy. But you've actually got a lot of the information from the government through this that people have wanted for quite a while.
Yeah, well, this is now in the public domain. Anybody can access these documents, as I did. It's, you just go to the federal court, make a request, as I did, and they'll send you a link, and you have the documents. So anybody really has access to them at this point. So I went through them, very methodically. I went through all of the transcripts and the affidavits, and I read them quite thoroughly. I spent my birthday going through these court documents. I'm not joking. I spent all day reading through them. But Andrew, I mean, to your earlier question, why did I want to write this? I think this is one of the great. I think this kind of thing needed to be exposed. I mean, we were told all along that this was about the science. We're following the science. Trust us, we're following the science. We're constantly consulting experts. We're constantly reviewing these mandates, and we're doing all of this great stuff. But let's face it, at the end of the day, what comes out from these cross examinations is that there was no science. This secretive group that is within Transport Canada doesn't have a single medical professional in their team. The person who heads the team has a bachelor's degree in English literature. That's her qualification. And so, these are people who concocted and designed the travel mandate, and which affected 5-6 million Canadians who couldn't even step on a train or a plane to go see their loved ones, within Canada or overseas. So, I felt, as I was reading through it, I felt that this really needed to be, the story needed to be told, and that, the public has a right to know. It's not just the 5-6 million Canadians who are affected by it, but it's all of us. When the government says they're following the science, you really have to really interrogate that more closely. You really have to, start asking some serious questions. Well, what is the science? Who are the experts you're consulting? How are these decisions made? Why is it that when you ask for more information, you're told it's cabinet confidence and we can't reveal this? We can't tell you the process involved that affected so many people, the lives of so many people. So this is why I felt that this really needed to be told, and I'm glad that I was able to tell the story.
When you talk about this committee that had no one with a scientific background on it, a lot of people would find that a little odd, because we know that there are medical advisors around the government. I mean, Theresa Tam is one of the most notable examples of this. And I've always been under the understanding that she and her team at Public Health Agency of Canada were involved in these mandates. So how do we know that it was coming from this body that didn't have a scientific background, or anyone on it with a scientific background?
Well, this comes through the cross-examinations. They were in charge of the travel mandate. They designed the travel mandate. And if you read through the transcripts, you'll see that Theresa Tam was not consulted on the travel mandates. PHAC wasn't consulted on the travel mandates. In fact, none of the top epidemiologists were consulted on the travel mandate, yet the travel mandate was based on the science. And so why were there no, serious medical professionals, doctors, epidemiologists, infectious diseases specialists? Why weren't they consulted on this? And that's a big question. And that's very clear, very clear in the cross-examination. And as I said, anybody can access these documents. I also want to, tell you a little bit about the two individuals who are, the two applicants in the case. It takes extraordinary courage to do what they did in challenging this, and challenging what they felt was unjust, and it's a battle that they've been fighting for 8 months, and it really is a David versus Goliath battle here. Two just average Canadians decided to take this upon themselves. And I also want to mention the lawyer. He's only 30 years old, and if not for his cross-examination of the witnesses, we really wouldn't even have this information. We wouldn't have what we have. So, I just want to put it out there that these three individuals have been incredibly amazing, and people, we owe a lot to them.
Now, I understand there is also a challenge. Not I understand. I know there's a challenge coming up in the fall from Brian Peckford and Maxime Bernier that the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms is taking up against the air travel vaccine mandate. Do you know, are these cases effectively the same? Are they going after the same thing and using the same arguments?
So I'm not familiar with the Peckford case. I can't speak to that. But as I understand, four cases were being heard roughly at the same time, or at the same time they were clubbed together. They're all very similar. I believe the Peckford. I can't really speak to the Peckford case. I don't know anything about it really. My
Because
focus
this
is.
one that you've covered has not gotten much media attention.
So far, no. The mainstream media has generally has been very silent on this. I'm not at all. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I am a little disappointed. I think this is huge. And as I say, anybody can access these documents and and find and just verify what I've done. It's not that hard. But yeah, I'm just a bit disappointed that nobody in the mainstream media has really picked up on this, or maybe they've seen it, but perhaps they don't want to touch it. But that would be a shame. I hope they're thinking on this changes, because I think this needs a lot of mainstream attention as well.
Are you optimistic that there will be a reckoning on this, either in the short term or the medium term? Because I think accepting what you've shared here, and I think what a lot of us have known and have been talking about before your story to some extent, although without the basis for it that you've been able to bring up here, people would have to admit that they bought into what was effectively a lie. And I don't think a lot of people want to admit to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, sorry, Andrew. Like, and just all my devices are ringing at the same time. Sorry about that. I know this is a live show, and
No,
yeah,
you're
sorry.
popular. I think it's to be expected at this point.
I just have a lot of people calling me right now. I don't even know how to mute this. Sorry about this. Um, um,
Maybe it's
sorry about
Justin
this.
Trudeau. He doesn't like the article,
Okay,
so he wants to hash it out with
sorry
you.
about this, Andrew. I mean, yeah, no, I just, I'm new to Signal, and the phone started ringing, and I don't know how to mute it. Sorry about that, but please repeat your question. This is so
Yeah, do you
unprofessional.
think there's going to be a reckoning on this, or do you think people will keep
Oh, yes.
going
Well,
with this
no,
charade?
there has to be a reckoning on this. There's got to be a reckoning on this. You cannot ignore. You can't ignore this. You can't ignore this at all. This information is now out in the public domain, and we're people are going to have to deal with it. I hope that there's some accountability. I really hope that comes soon, in whatever shape or form. But you can't ignore what is out there, and I'm cautiously optimistic that there will be some kind of reckoning down the road.
What's the status of the case itself? I mean, obviously, if they've gone through the process of having the cross examinations and the evidence and the depositions, do you know when the actual trial is going to be?
I think in September they're hearing this. They're hearing the damages motion, I believe, and or the mootness motion. The Attorney General has filed a mootness motion. So if that succeeds, then the whole thing just ends right there. But if not, there's going to be a final hearing in October.
So the mootness, I'm glad you brought up the mootness motion, because this is a very sneaky thing that the government does. And they do it in other cases as well, where they say, well, the vaccine mandate has been lifted, so there's really no point in having this case. And it allows them to keep doing the same thing again and again and again. And I do hope the judge understands that this is not something that you can just get away with here. That even though you've lifted it for now, the fact that the government has said it could come back at any point means this is not moot at all.
Exactly. That there is a discrepancy there, and I'm glad that you pointed that out. There is a discrepancy between what the Attorney General is saying when he says, "Yeah, the mandates are now gone, so the case is moot." But on the other hand, you have his cabinet colleagues saying that fully expect these mandates to return if cases are once again out of control and our hospitals are under stress, we won't hesitate to bring them back. So there's a discrepancy between, what the Attorney General is saying and what, some of the ministers are saying. So it is very sneaky. I think it's a way for them to kind of just quietly bury this. And so, people forget about it and move on. The mandates are gone for now, at least. It is pretty sneaky, but, kudos to the lawyer for, coming up with a way to, keep this going.
Rupa Subramanya, my colleague at True North and host of the Rupa Subramanya Show, and also author of this great piece at commonsense.news. Court documents reveal Canada's travel ban had no scientific basis. Rupa, great work as always, and thanks very much for coming on today.
Thanks so much, Andrew. And again, I apologize to you and to your audience for the audio issues and my phone ringing nonstop in the background. Well,
you're welcome back anytime. We won't hold it against you. Thanks very much, Rupa. Good to talk to you as always. I want to just to put the context here. I want people to hear from Omar El Gabra the language that the government uses when it comes to these mandates. Take a look.
Vaccination is making it possible to keep us safe while we cautiously return to doing the things that we love. And I would like to acknowledge that most Canadians have been doing their part in helping combating COVID-19 by getting vaccinated. And we are today following up on our commitment prior to the election and a commitment that we've debated vigorously throughout the election campaign. With rigorous travel requirements that include mandatory vaccine measures, we are continuing to take action to help keep Canadians safe from COVID-19. In the transportation sector, this means rules are in place requiring travelers to be vaccinated in order to board planes, trains, or vessels as of October 30th. Starting tomorrow, passengers flying on domestic, transborder, or international flights departing from Canada and passengers on Via Rail and the Rocky Mountaineer trains must be fully vaccinated in order to board.
So that is an older clip from right after the election when they first unveiled it. And I just noticed, by the way, that his vest that they gave him says health and safety rep, which I don't know why that amuses me, but it amuses me. So take from that what you will. But what he's doing there is telling us all that, oh, we're making good on a campaign commitment. This is all business as usual. It's all fine. Don't worry about it. And again, the idea that this is about safety. The idea that this is about safety, that's been the government's whole point. Even the health and safety vest. This is what the government claims. And we know now that it absolutely was not the case. I want to pivot and ever so slightly. I mean, we're still going to be on this general realm of vaccine mandates and the resistance thereof, because I want to talk about the convoy. And a part of this, admittedly, is going to be a bit self-serving, because I said in the post here and I said in a previous show, I'm going to do an Ask Me Anything edition of the show, but ask me anything about the convoy. And I'm going to just take your questions about the convoy, about my new book, which is out. You can see it over my shoulder there, The Freedom Convoy, the inside story of 3 weeks that shook the world. And by the way, I shouldn't say, I mean, you all told me you wanted me to do this. So I'm just trying to give the people what they want, as they say. But the reason I want to do this now is because there has been this weird sort of revisionism that's been taking place about the convoy. Last night, I don't know if any of you watched it. Everyone on Twitter was tagging me in it. There was Glenn McGregor of CTV did this thing called a reporter's notebook, which I thought was going to be this like really melodramatic revisionism of the convoy. And to Glenn's credit, it really wasn't. I mean, it was kind of just like it's summer and no news is happening, so we're going to do a clip show. He walked around Ottawa on Canada Day, and he talked about some of the things he covered. And then really all that happened was they just played a bunch of clips from the convoy. So there wasn't anything to get up in arms about. But I was very grateful to all the people on Twitter that were like tagging Glenn saying, we don't need your reporter's notebook. Just buy Andrew Lawton's book. And I'm like, yes, please buy my book. It's on Amazon. It's a bestseller. And I will say, actually, on that note, it was the #1 nonfiction book on Amazon.ca last week. It has been for 3 weeks in a row the #1 Toronto Star bestseller, and it has been for 3 weeks in a row the #1 Globe and Mail bestseller. And I share this partially to gloat, not entirely to gloat. I share it with you to explain why I'm a wee bit perplexed that there has been zero mainstream media attention about this book. And I'll say zero with an asterisk because it depends on how you frame mainstream media. I've done a couple of radio interviews, one on Sirius XM Canada Talks with Dahlia Kurtz, who's fantastic. And that was, I guess, sort of mainstream adjacent. I did a talk radio interview out in Saskatchewan. But all of the interviews I've done have been podcast and alternative media, which I'm happy to do. I love podcasts. I love independent media. And I am thrilled that this book has become a bestseller without needing the mainstream media. So the gatekeepers of the media have not needed to cover this for it to do well. But I'm still very, very disappointed. And I don't say that for my own self-interest, but I'm disappointed as someone who values truth and as someone who values the marketplace of ideas and as someone who values debate, that there has been this gatekeeper effect that has been allowed to take hold, not just by the media, but also by Indigo. I don't even remember if I talked about it on the show in much detail, but a couple of weeks ago, there was that National Post article that acknowledged that Indigo has basically said, we do not want this book on our shelves. We have a deep knowledge of our customer, and they don't think that the book should be on their shelves. They think it's more important to have the extra couple of dildos on aisle 4 than to have a book about Convoy. Private company, they have the right to do it. That's absolutely their prerogative. Jen Gerson, who is the co-founder of The Line, she had a piece that I thought was quite fair about this called A2 Bookstore. And she talked about, of course, bringing Julius Caesar into a modern context, how Indigo has gone all in on being a lifestyle brand rather than a bookstore. And if that's the way that Indigo can assure its survival, okay, fine. Indigo, have fun. Sell your candles, sell your blankets, sell your sex toys, and keep your books in a back corner with the dust on them. And if someone wants one, you have to go, oh, yeah, I think we sell. I think I saw a book here. One second. I think we have books somewhere. Carl, where are the books? Oh, yeah, they're just, you go down back the aisle, you go under the pillows, you go through the archway, and then at the very back, they have a few on a little display case there. And that's Indigo's problem. That's Indigo's decision. If the customers want it, fine. Interestingly enough, the hashtag boycott Indigo was trending, and I had nothing to do with it, but the hashtag boycott Indigo was trending on Twitter when that story came out. And then interestingly enough, a week later in Financial Post, there was this like glowing story about Indigo's embrace of lifestyle brands and consumer trends and all of this without mentioning any of the controversy. I'm like, there's a PR person that has earned their take by getting that story planted in the newspaper. But the reason I bring all of this up, and I realize that I am inherently talking about myself and my own book here, but I've been very clear since I started writing this that I want this story told by more people. I want more perspectives. I would love it if someone on the left wrote a book with their perspective on this, because I think that's the way you unlock truth. I mean, that was John Stuart Mill's idea, that the marketplace of ideas is critical because it's by me saying my piece and you're saying your piece that we either A, determine if one of us is right, or alternatively unlock a truth that maybe lies between our two positions. And it's shameful, absolutely shameful, that the mainstream media is so terrified of entertaining a perspective that is not even sycophantic to the convoy, a perspective that is sympathetic to the convoy and strives to understand these people and strives to talk about what happened, that the media is so terrified of that perspective that they will not pay any attention whatsoever to this book. And interestingly enough, some of them have gone out of their way to not. And I'm taking your questions, by the way. I'm getting a little ranty here, but if you have any questions, post them in the comments, and I will get to several of them before the show ends. But I'll give you one example of how, and I won't name names, because believe it or not, I actually try to take the high road, even when other people don't. There was an interview that someone alerted me to that I heard, I think it was last week at some point, maybe 2 weeks ago. And it was the day or two after the National Post story about Indigo came out. And there was a Bell Media journalist who did an interview on air with another journalist who is more from the left. Very fair, very reasonable interview with me. Sorry, I'll back up. She interviewed someone who interviewed me. And the interview that I had done with this person was a very fair and reasonable interview. But she interviewed this person about me and about my book. And it was a very weird interview, because in the interview, she's like, you know what? And so why did Andrew write this? And so what is Andrew doing about this? And what did Andrew do about this? And the other journalist at a certain point, to his credit, said, you know, I find it interesting that the mainstream media hasn't really had any interest in this. And here's a great example of this. You're asking me about his book instead of having him on. And immediately she just pivoted it. She basically just changed the topic to something entirely unrelated to the convoy and to the book. And I never like to judge people too harshly, because I don't know. I mean, maybe it was just a slow day and the segment was thrown together at the last minute or whatever. Maybe I'm too generous, but it was like the epitome of bending over backwards to avoid talking to me about my book, which means to avoid. If you are in Ontario, you know exactly what just happened right now, because it happened to you too, and probably terrified you like it did me. We just got an Amber Alert. So, and fortunately, because we're not on television, the Amber Alert didn't actually interrupt the show. So you still have to look at me. But I wish the very best to the person who has been identified in this Amber Alert. But never live. Okay, we're just not going to do it live anymore. We're doing like the anti-Bill O'Reilly thing. Oh, we're never doing it live. No, we're not doing it live. But the challenge we have here is that all of the people who say, yes, you know, I want the truth and I want to be the guardian of the truth, are saying we don't want that truth. I mean, just take a look at Indigo as a Canadian company. They say, well, yeah, we want to tell Canadian stories. And I'm like, hey, Canadian storyteller here. And if you look at some of the, not that I spend much time on the Indigo website, especially now, but a lot of the books they're promoting are not Canadian books. And again, they have to go with what consumers want. If you look at the Canadian bestseller list, a lot of the books on there are not by Canadian authors. And it's interesting, the same government that says, oh, we need to focus on Canadian stories and Canadian content. Where's my, Governor General Award? I'm not holding my breath, but you know what? Someone nominate me for a Governor General Award. That's what we'll really celebrate this Canadian story that is the Freedom Convoy. This is an Ask Me Anything edition of the show about the convoy, about the book. If you want to go into vaccine mandates, you certainly can as well. Murray says, who gave you the interview in Saskatchewan? Gormley. Yes. And John Gormley, I have been on a show many times over the years, but not in a great many years. So I love talking to John Gormley. He did a great job. Chris writes, I was always under the impression that Indigo was for the books, wasn't it? I think it used to be. And I think when it was called Chapters, it was a bit more for the books. And now I think they still have some Chapters locations, but I think most of them have flipped to Indigo. And Indigo is, again, it's a lifestyle brand. The whole point is that Indigo is if you watch that movie with Tom Hanks, You've Got Mail, Indigo is Tom Hanks. Like, there was that one line of, if we don't get them with our books, we'll get them with our mochachinos or cappuccinos. I haven't watched the movie in like 25 years or whenever it came out, but like Indigo is the Tom Hanks character. They're the villains in the like story of book sales. And the great irony is that they're not even selling books. So it's like they're galvanizing independent bookstores. And the real flip there is that they're not even using their power and footprint to sell books. They're using it to sell other things. So I hope there's a resurgence of the independent bookstore. There is a question here. Why do left-wing people call the convoy truckers, but like this doesn't work well for audio, but TRUKKKERS. There was nothing KKK about the convoy at all. That's from Alexander. Now, I hadn't seen that until you shared it with me, but it doesn't surprise me. The one that I see a lot more of is the Freedom Convoy. It's, FREEDUMB, which is, ever so clever or something. But again, it's people that don't understand who these people are. And Justin Trudeau did this. I mean, Justin Trudeau unleashed on these people the derision and vulgarity and crassness and crudeness by calling this a fringe minority with unacceptable views. So I don't normally think it's fair to blame politicians for what Canadians do. But in this particular case, Justin Trudeau gave people moral license to look down on these people, to otherize them, and to not listen to their concerns and to not hear them out. And one of the reasons I wrote the book is because I believed, and I still believe, that even if you oppose the convoy, you need to understand what it was about. I want to, just before I move on to more of your questions, play this clip from Paul Champ. Paul Champ, who is the lawyer representing the proposed class action against the convoy that got the injunction against horn honking. Take a listen.
And so if you came downtown, it was like some kind of dystopian nightmare, the thunderous hum. You could be blocks and blocks away, like on the other side of the Queensway, and you could still hear it. And as you get closer, it would just get louder and louder. And then if you're in the heart of the red zone or the horn zone, I'll tell you, and I've got the medical experts on retainer now to tell me, you are at very high risk of experiencing permanent hearing damage and harm.
Dystopian nightmare. Dystopian nightmare. Now, I have not read as much fiction as some other people. I'm prepared to cede that point. But when I think of a dystopia, I've actually never read a dystopic novel or seen a dystopic film that has a bouncy castle in it. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm not as learned as some other people out there, but I have never heard of a dystopia with a bouncy castle. I've never heard, there was a dystopia once with a pig roast, but I've never heard of a dystopia with an inflatable hot tub. I've never heard of a dystopia with people linking their arms and singing "We Are the World." Although, in fairness, if they kept singing "We Are the World" over and over, that might cross into dystopia. But there are a lot of things about the convoy that don't quite fit this dystopic hellhole narrative that we're getting from lawyer Paul Champ, who is, again, he's literally the man overseeing the lawsuit against the convoy, the proposed class action, which, interestingly enough, and I talk about this in my book, every single organizer that I spoke to that I asked about this said that they... it was actually hilarious, said that they secretly liked the injunction. They secretly liked when the court said you can't honk your horns anymore, because everyone, believe it or not, was fed up with the horn honking. So the idea that this was like a menace just to the people of Ottawa is perhaps true, but it was a menace to everyone, and it was done within the first few days, because after that injunction, the horn honking did stop, and it was a few isolated examples, and it was quickly tamped down upon. Linda says, do they sell your book at Coles bookstore? No, and this is the problem, Linda, because Coles is owned by Chapters Indigo, which has decided that it is against carrying my book on store shelves. So they sell it on the Indigo website, and they sell it on the Amazon website, and they sell it at SutherlandHouseBooks.com, which is my publisher. But I don't actually know what bookstores, if any, have it on store shelves. There might be some independent ones that have it, but the biggest bookseller in Canada as far as brick and mortar store, Chapters Indigo Coles, has said, nope, we don't like the cut of your jib. We do not want the convoy customers in our store. They don't really fit in here. They're not really our type of people. So you can just buy it online. You can buy it online. And look, it's a bestseller. Sales are sales, but I want more perspectives, and I want bookstores to understand that they are like libraries. Libraries are carrying my book, which, I don't know what I think about that. You can get it for free, but you can't buy it. So I don't know. Take from that what you will. But the whole point of this is that bookstores, and Indigo's own philosophy historically, was about being this gateway to knowledge. And it's interesting now that they're putting my book in the same category as Mein Kampf, which is, we don't want it on the shelf. So again, their choice, but I can call it out as the wrong choice. And I don't say that as the author. I say that as a customer. I say that as a consumer. And a lot of the people emailing Indigo have said something very similar. We got a message here from Debbie. She says, class action mask and travel mandates. Why do you suppose CBC not covering that story as well? I think the media will cover some of these cases when they get to trial. To be honest, I think there have been so many legal challenges that a lot of media don't necessarily know where to start on them, and they haven't been following all of them and all of that. But I think there is a point to the realities that we were talking about with Rupa earlier, in that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that they were hoodwinked. And a lot of people don't want to acknowledge that they bought into something which simply isn't true. And that is this idea that it was politics and not science driving the mandates that we clung to as though it was scientific gospel. and that some people still are, and that the government has threatened and just dangled above us as possibly coming back in the fall. And I have very, very little optimism left that the government won't do exactly that. We get a surge of cases in the fall, and all of a sudden we're right back into where we were 6 months ago. Mask mandates everywhere, vaccine mandates, vaccine passports in some form. And, you know, there are some places that I don't think will do it. I mean, if Danielle Smith becomes the premier of Alberta, I certainly would guarantee you that Alberta is not going to go down that road. But we forget how much authority the federal government has. I mean, right now, unvaccinated people have been unable to book air travel because they were banned from it. And now they're all doing it. I mean, what happens if people are booking trips and then the government just brings back the mandate and says, oh, yep, the vaccinated can't fly anymore? Is this a normal way for a society to function? Absolutely not. But it's become normal in Canada. We've got to end things there. My thanks to all of you for tuning in to the program today. If you want to read the book for yourself, you can get it at Amazon. It's called The Freedom Convoy, The Inside Story of 3 Weeks That Shook the World. And like I said, it's not just a recap. It is a book that advances new information about the convoy. And I'm so honored by all of you that have reached out and sent me your pictures with the book. If you have more of those, tweet them out and I'll retweet you if you post a picture of my book. And let me know what you think about it. But thank you, truly, because I know, and I said this a few weeks ago, it pained a Toronto Star and a Globe and Mail book editor a great deal to have to type in the title of my book in the #1 spot. And I would like them to have to keep that discomfort up for just a few more weeks. So we'll talk to you soon, folks. This is the Andrew Lawton Show on True North. Thank you, God bless, and good day to you all.
For listening to the Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.